Welcome back to the Saltworks podcast. I'm your host, Hallie Dye. I'm so excited that you're here with us today. We've got a great episode on the podcast today is Kelley Frankowicz. She is real. She is honest. She is diving into her story, talking about overcoming perfectionism and living fully surrendered. We talk about that struggle that we have wanting to live fully for Christ, but also being dragged away by the things of the world at times. It's a great episode. I can't wait for you to hear it. But before we dive in, I want to tell you about a couple of partners for this episode. Northeast Imaging is a patient-friendly diagnostic testing facility that is doctor-trusted and patient-preferred. They offer MRI, CT, X-ray, and ultrasound. The facility is conveniently located at 1703 Lammy Lane here in Monroe. Their friendly staff provides high-quality scans focusing on the delivery of exemplary care to the patient and their referring providers. Whether you are using your health insurance or you're paying out of pocket, Northeast Imaging is almost always more affordable than local hospitals. They're open Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. For more information, call 318-570-4985. Tell your healthcare provider that you want Northeast Imaging today. Dye Brothers Group. Now, you know that with this ever-changing real estate market, we can feel lost, and Dye Brothers Group is here to help you and your family navigate all your real estate needs. Whether it's residential or commercial, Andrew and Micah offer professional and friendly quality service to our community. Don't hesitate to give them a call today for any of your real estate needs, and make sure you follow them on Facebook for any tips and updates in the market, whether these interest rates are changing or what that means for you, and also all of their newest listing. Thank you, Northeast Imaging and Dye Brothers Group. And now we get to dive into this conversation. I'm so excited. Kelley, it's been chaotic getting here for me, and you've come here after work, but thank you so much for coming today.
Of course.
It's a lot for anyone, but we basically contacted you and we're like, first of all, your name keeps coming to my mind as I'm praying and thinking over the podcast. And also, so would you be willing? And also, would you be willing right now?
Sure.
You were basically like, and I was like, it's okay if you're not, like, if you're not ready right now, you need time to pray. Like, we'd still love to have you anytime, but also we'd like to tack on if you're willing. And you were.
But I knew, because I've been praying, like I told you, Lord, get me uncomfortable. And then I'm like, why
Kelly,
do I
what
do
led
that,
you to
Lord?
pray that?
I think because I've gotten too comfortable. I've gotten too complacent, and I knew that I don't like that uneasy feeling. I felt distance from the Lord, and I know anytime it's like that, it's me. It's never him. He's always there. And so I was like, okay, Lord, you got to get me uncomfortable again. And so he's burdened my heart to go and do other things. I love to serve within our church, but Jesus said, therefore go and make disciples. And so he's calling me outside of church walls.
Yeah.
Which is very uncomfortable for me.
Sure.
But it's not about me.
That's good. And I know we're going to hear more of that throughout your story because you have a story of him getting you uncomfortable. Yep. And honestly, we all do. Like, would we ever choose it if we didn't have to, you know?
Absolutely not.
I mean, maybe I'm speaking for me, but I feel like it's all of us. Well, before I skip right into your story, for people who don't know you, because I know many people do, but even for people who know you, they don't know everything about you. Who is Kelley Frankowicz?
Well, I always have to start out with, because I misplaced my identity for so long, I am a believer of Christ. I'm a follower of Christ.
Yeah.
Of course, first and foremost, I am a wife. I am a mom. And so Chad and I have been married for 22 years.
Wow.
And we have a 22-year-old, which you don't have to do the math, and we're probably going to talk about that.
Sure. Yes.
Luke, who just graduated college.
Wow.
Which we're in all the seasons, because then we have 11-year-old and a 10-year-old.
Yeah.
And so I feel like we're all over the place. Busy, crazy. Everybody keeps saying it's going to keep us young, but I'm like, I'm not really sure.
I think it's making me gray.
Yeah, I'm having to start putting blonde in my hair to cover up these grays.
I'm just kidding. You look young. But yeah, I get that feeling for sure. And I don't have anyone in college. So yeah, that's a lot. Well, and your work.
Yes.
You know.
I'm a nurse anesthetist. And so I always knew when I was little exactly what I wanted to do. And so my 22-year-old who does not know what he wants to do yet, although he's graduated college, I've struggled with that because I'm like, I always knew. How do you not know?
Let me release you. I also do not know what I want to do.
Okay.
So it's okay.
And
That
you
is,
turned out
that is,
good.
well, that's debatable, but I am still here. And, you know, I think there's purpose.
Yes,
So
of course. He's
I
going to be
love it.
fine. He's going to be fine.
He will. He will. Well, and not to mention, and I know we'll talk more about this because this is a part of your story and complacency and in prayer and intentionality that honestly you do choose. Like there's a lot of people that hit places of comfort and get comfortable there, you know?
Yeah.
And so, but you also teach a Wednesday night Bible study and have been for 3 to 4 years ish, which is a long time. Anyone who's never led
it is
might not realize, you know, but that's a long time. And then did y'all just start a life group? Who is in y'all, like who started it?
Chris and Aaron Harrell.
And then are y'all teaching as well?
Yes.
You and Chad. Okay.
So that was a big thing too, because 3 different people had approached us within a year, over a year's time. And I wouldn't even address it. I just kept saying, no, I have too much. I'm too busy. The kids, running them everywhere after I get off work and Wednesday nights. And so then, well, we call him Big Dad. So Big Dad had asked Chad. And at first I said, no, like we can't do this, honey. Like I cannot add one more thing on my plate. And then the Lord woke me up that next morning and was like, no, like I say, you know, I'm in control. I'm the one who has plans. And because I always try to plan out everything. We're going to talk about perfectionism. And so anyway, so I said, you know what? I text Chad and I said, on my way to work, I said, I'm going to pray about it. Like, why was that not my first instinct?
But you know what, Kelley? Like, I will say this, like, because it sounds like you feel like, okay, that was a failure, that I didn't pray about it, that I had this ready no. But honestly, like, I do think there is some encouragement in what you just shared, because I feel like you and I just talked about this before we started recording, that Andrew and I are in a, like, majorly busy season in different directions, you know, and like, honestly, I'm kind of glad because we have a lot of togetherness over the things we're fighting. Like you're trying to make it over here, I'm trying to make it over here. So like we actually do bond over that, but it's a lot. It's a lot. And so in like thinking through, okay, what do we need to have on our plate? What do we need to take off our plate? What's necessary? What does the Lord have for us? What are we trying to do? Like one of the things that we've talked about is like, in seasons where you're like, I'm at max capacity, I'm going to have this ready no, but he's not going to let me.
That's right.
He's not going to let me go to sleep without a burden. If he meant for me to say yes. And that confirms that in your story, you know? And so like, I say all that to say, like, I hope someone listening hears freedom, that like, you don't have to have spiritual FOMO. Like you're not going to miss like his will for your life.
Yes, he
you
won't
know,
let
if
you.
you're seeking him, like he's not gonna let you miss it.
That's right.
Yeah, that's so good. So you came back and were like, well, maybe.
And so I did. I prayed about it, and I knew. I was like, okay, Lord, I don't know how there's a way, but I know you make a way because I've lived His faithfulness, and so we just hanging on a prayer.
Yeah.
And so, and He has. When I tell you, He has blessed so much. I hate that it was delayed because of me not even entertaining it, but all in God's timing, perfect timing. Did not realize it was such a need.
Wow.
This group is, I mean, such a blessing to us. We just had our first little get together and it was so fun. And it's people like we do life with.
That's what Chad was saying, that y'all did like pickleball.
Yes. And nobody got hurt.
That is so fun. Nobody got hurt.
Nobody got hurt.
Nobody pulled anything.
Yeah, we're good. It was so fun. And they're just easy to talk to, and I feel like it's so open. And so I mean, Big Dad really is such a good leader. I have been so just impressed at what the Lord's done through him. And so just getting to watch that too, from where they came from and us and friendships way back in the day, to seeing God move and just sit back and be in awe. I mean, Chad and I really are just there. And
I know that's not true, but
getting to see the fruit
Yeah.
of that.
Yeah.
And it's been so good.
That is so fun. I'm excited for y'all. It's
Mhm.
I haven't been to y'all's class, but it's next door and I thought y'all were leaders, but I was like, maybe I've just assumed that. But anyways, but it looks like y'all, I mean, it's full,
It
right?
is, like, we
It's filling
really
up.
need to get a
Yeah.
bigger
Yes.
room. Hint, hint, Cody Albritton. I know we don't have room, but one day.
That's right. We'll just have to like knock that wall down in between us
Yeah,
and
yes,
just
and have one
yeah,
big,
yeah,
yeah,
there we go.
that'd be
And we
fun.
can play pickleball too if we do that.
Yes,
Um, by
for
the
sure.
way, for anybody that wants to hear Chris Farrell's story, we did also share his
Oh,
story and people can go
yes.
back and listen. So
Yep,
shameless plug.
yep.
So Kelley, we've hit on a lot of like topics that we're going to talk about woven in and out. And you know, I do not have an agenda. We're going to pause and camp there when they come up.
Okay.
But I do want to go back to your childhood.
Mhm.
Just kind of set the scene, your family, your dad's vocation, that sort of stuff, and what that looked like.
Okay. So I was asking my dad because all I remember is my daddy preaching. So he surrendered to the ministry in 83. And I said, I wasn't going to tell y'all my age, but now everybody's going to know because I was 3 years old. But his first church to pastor, I was 9. So
Mhm.
all I can remember is my daddy being the spiritual leader of our house. That's all I knew. We
Yeah.
were at church. We were raised in church. Anytime the doors were open, we lived right next to the church. It was like a sidewalk away. And so, not that our lives were perfect by any means, but I had a strong foundation
Mm-hmm.
in Jesus from a young age. I
Yeah.
accepted Jesus at 7.
Yeah.
I know I have struggled with that because I was so young
Mm-hmm.
over the years, and I didn't wholeheartedly follow Jesus until early adulthood. Actually, really full
Mm-hmm.
surrender about 5 or 6 years ago. But
Yeah.
anyway, so I remember that day. I remember I did not go with a group of friends. I know some
Mm-hmm.
people say, like, I don't really know if I knew what I was doing. Like, I remember
Right.
I waited, I knew. And I remember going down, talking with my daddy, praying, asking Jesus to forgive me for my sins.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked him to come into my heart. And so after that, we would do youth things. We always went to conferences and we always had all these fun things to do. But I also liked the world.
Yeah.
Even though I knew better,
Yeah.
I still made wrong choices. But I really was reading my Bible. Like
Yeah.
people would call me like Miss Goody Two Shoes. And then my sister, you know, the middle child always gets in trouble. And so she was kind of getting in trouble. And so my parents were like, I need you to go with her and I need you to keep her on the straight and narrow. Well, what happens when you get introduced to things and you start going and doing things? Well, she actually, I always say it's her fault. I always blame her. And so I had my first drink at probably, I think, either 12 or 13.
Mm. Yeah.
I actually chipped my front tooth on a Boone's bottle, if people
Oh
know
my
what that was back in
goodness.
the day. And I had to
Oh
lie and tell my
man.
mom it was a blow pop.
Yeah.
Sorry, Mom.
Is she hearing that for the first time today?
Maybe.
Full disclosure on the salt works. Okay, so now you grow up, you're really a rule follower. And honestly, I
Yeah.
think people are going to continue to see that in your personality. Like
Mhm.
even though you're hitting on some places that you call rebellion, like you're kind of to your core still
Oh, yeah.
like the structure, like the rule follower, but you know, you were like, I still like the world, which honestly, Kelley, who among us?
Yeah.
You know, like it looks differently.
Mhm.
And it kind of depends on what idol we're serving,
That's right.
but there's almost always a pull. There
That's
is always a pull.
Yeah, that's so true
Yeah.
because, you know, when we read in the Old Testament and they had physical idols, you
Yeah.
know, like the golden statues. And then you think about they worship Baal, all these different gods. And I'm
Mhm.
like, how can y'all be so stupid? And then
I
I'm like,
know.
wait,
I
that's
know.
us. Our idols just look different. Like we
Yeah.
can even idolize our husbands, our kids,
Mhm.
like things.
Well, and like we're going to talk about this, but we can idolize control, like our own
Oh, yeah.
control, and we can say the Lord's my fortress, but like we're making our fortress and what we can manipulate, you
Yep.
know, in our lives, and like that's everyone. But I think back to that, and it is hard to even put ourselves in that time in history where we like in Western culture we don't see people bow down to a physical idol a whole
Mm-hmm.
lot. Not saying it doesn't happen,
Right.
but it's not how I've grown up, I haven't seen that a whole lot. But if I put myself in a time where that was prevalent, it was normalized, it was whatever, it begins to beg the question, like, what's normalized in my culture, that someone else would say, well, why in the world, or how
Yeah.
could they fall prey to that? But also, I think that one of the appealing things, putting myself in that culture where it's normal for other cultures to do that, other people groups outside of the Israelites, and how, like, so much of their rhythms with false guides were things they could control. I feel this way, so I'm going to do XYZ.
Yep.
I'm going to appeal to, and also that, like to have multiple gods. It's like, I'm feeling this way, so I'm going to appeal to this God. I'm feeling this way, so I'm going to appeal to this. Okay, like, well, over here, we're going to pray for this because we want to have a baby. Over here, we're going to, and like, we see that in our lives as well, even though, again, it's not this graven image necessarily, but it is.
Yeah.
Because it's this idea of success, or it's this idea of happiness or fulfillment that we've carved out in our minds,
Which is all temporary.
All so temporary, but looks so good. It does. And sometimes brings fulfillment for a second.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what can make it seem so promising.
Yep.
So yeah, I can very much relate. So you're introduced to new things, totally new to you. What can you tell us a little bit, as you feel comfortable, about what prompted the move to Sterlington?
Yes. So my middle sister, of course, again, we found out that she was pregnant at 16. And I knew, our parents didn't know. And honestly, like, when I talked to Casey about it, like, we were raised in such a bubble that she didn't even think about that she could get pregnant, because it was just understood that we were not going to do those things. And I think it's a different generation too. They didn't talk about things back then like we do now.
Yeah.
And so that she talked to our parents, and it's such a cool story. And I love that my mom can talk about it. And I think she would be comfortable with me sharing that they did not see any other option other than to terminate the pregnancy.
Yeah.
And as a mom of a little girl, and just seeing what our family went through during that time, like, I mean, I can see that she was just thinking about her child. She was just thinking about the life that her child would have. And so, of course, Daddy stepped down from the ministry at that time. And honestly, the church was really good. I will have to say, they asked him not to leave, because, they knew we're all sinners in need of a savior. But he just felt like, with this going on in our family, that he could not get behind the pulpit. So we moved to Sterlington, and I was about to start my freshman year of high school, and Casey was about to start her junior year. And so we were devastated. We cried and cried. We begged to stay. But of course, looking back and seeing what the Lord has done and moving us to Sterlington, my parents are still there. It was such a blessing, and it just shows that God can use anything for his glory. And he's used Casey's story. She helps with post-abortion Bible studies. My mom's found freedom. She's asked forgiveness for it, and making that decision. And so the Lord has, what the enemy meant for evil, the Lord has used it for good. And we talk about that scripture all the time in her story.
Absolutely.
But that's where I think it really hit me, that perfectionism it really became part of my life and controlled my life, because at that point, I saw what my parents went through. I saw that it completely wrecked our home, and I was like, I don't want my parents to have to worry about me. So I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that I'm doing the right things, and I take one less thing off their plate.
I really, like, reading over your notes, like I really loved that you laid it out that way, because I think that sometimes, and I'm not saying we don't come to at perfectionism for different reasons
Mm-hmm.
and through different experiences, but I think sometimes when we look at the struggle of perfectionism at face value, it can seem like, well, you just want all these like accolades and you want all the success and whatever. And like by all means, we do have to lay those things down over and over,
Yes.
because it does feel nice to be successful, and we
Yeah,
have to
sure.
constantly remember like what is success in his kingdom, you know, like I
Yeah.
mean that we get that so much at the Saltworks. But I love that your story so clearly lays out that like the beginning of your perfectionism was led by kindness and compassion for someone
Mm-hmm.
else. It wasn't just trying to be the best, it was kind of trying to be less
Yeah.
in a way.
Yeah.
I think perfectionism usually looks like playing out like you're trying to be more, you're trying to do more, and it does to some degree, but like emotionally you were trying to be less,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And we'll see this in your story, but like when we aren't honest about having needs, our needs go unmet,
Yes.
you know? And I can remember really struggling in a season where I just felt so needy because I was broken, and like, you know, I'm back there today, honestly, a little bit. I mean, I texted you this morning and was like, I don't even know what I said, honestly, but just something along the lines of like, we're going to record this from a place of defeat. Like, we're going to record this that feels like that.
Yeah.
We're going to record this from a place that feels like total weakness, because I don't feel put together. I am not put together. I don't know the next step with the Saltworks, with a lot of things. And today feels like a setback. And I don't think the enemy wanted us to record
Yeah.
this episode. I'm being really
Of
honest,
course.
because everything in me wanted to cancel.
Yeah.
And that's why I didn't. But I say all that to say, when I first had those feelings a couple years ago, I was really struggling with the feeling of being needy,
Mm.
of feeling needy, because I had needs, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, because I had weakness
Yeah.
that I couldn't push past,
Mm-hmm.
overcompensate for. And I looked up the definition of needy, and it's actually someone whose needs go unmet. And so, actually, the person that's not honest with the weakness that they have
Mm.
and the things that they need, which is
Yeah.
everyone, is the neediest person in the room.
Yeah.
And
Nice.
like that, I don't, that really spoke to me, because when we are human, and it is
Yes.
humbling, and we need everybody. We need each
Yes.
other. We need the Lord so
For sure. But
much.
it's so hard to admit that.
It's so
It's
hard.
so hard to ask somebody. For me, like, we're supposed to have it all together. I mean, y'all just led a life group. Like, they're thinking
Yeah.
we got it all together, and we definitely don't. And so it's hard to say, hey, look, I'm struggling.
Yes.
Like, I need some prayers. I need this. But I've learned, like, it's okay to not be okay.
Yeah.
And his power is made perfect in my weakness. So why
Yeah.
am I trying to be over here acting like I got everything together and that I can do this, because I can't, because apart from him, I can do nothing.
Yeah.
And that is hard to admit for somebody who wants to have it all together and can try to control things.
It's so hard. It's so hard. And even like this has come up a lot this season so far, is that like in our wilderness seasons, in our hardships, in our
Mhm.
darkest moments, our theology is refined.
Yes.
What do you believe about God? Who do
Yes.
you believe he is? How do you believe he works? How do you believe he feels about you? You
Yeah.
know, like all of that is refined in those places where you go, wait, hold up. This is not lining up with the theology I've held, you know? And
Yes.
like that this morning, like, because the Lord has had me in the wilderness for 40 days and 40 nights. I,
Multiply mine by 10.
uh-huh. 40 years.
Yeah.
40 years.
Yeah. I mean, although I'm not 40,
Yeah.
I mean, hello.
But like, you know, like that, like he has had me there with teaching, he has had me there in my personal walk, like we like, you know, walking through it. And so this morning, like, just for a lot of reasons within the Saltworks and some outside of, where I'm like, I don't see a way. I don't know.
Mhm.
I don't know if we're going to be able to do this. I don't know if this is going to happen. I don't know if we're going to be able to stay in this office. I don't know. Like, I don't
Mhm.
know what you're going to do, but I know that you have plans. I know this is the way that you work. I know this is whatever. But the kindness of the Lord of walking in the wilderness is, Lord, I know what I know. I know what is written. I know you.
Yes.
But today I'm going to weep.
Yeah.
And it just is like Jesus knew when he was going to raise Lazarus. He knew. He knew that he was going to redeem all of creation.
Mhm.
He knew he was going to wipe every tear eventually. He knew he was about to raise Lazarus in that moment, but he still wept.
That's right.
And that to me, like that was another chip of my striving in perfectionism is like, I know what I know, and I'm not going to feel shame to weep today.
That's right.
And wept I have.
Yes, and it's okay.
With everyone that's come in
It's like
this
he holds
office.
our tears in a bottle. I'm like, I must have some big old bottles. This is everywhere in heaven, like for sure. Because it's okay. I've learned. Like I used to get embarrassed too.
I
Like,
know.
why am I crying? I look so stupid. And then nobody will tell you when I started using fiber mascara. Well, you'll have like two lashes. So you're smiling at everybody afterwards, and it's like, I just look a hot mess. Because I am a hot mess.
I mean, it's real. It's so real. I
Yes.
hate it. I hate when I cry when I speak, which is almost every time. And
Yeah.
I'm like, Lord, what are we doing?
I know. I know. He's humbling us.
He is. He is all the time. Okay, sorry, I got us off
It's okay. It's good.
onto a rant there, but a good one, I think. So this is the beginning of your perfectionism, is what we were getting into, and that was you were actually trying to be helpful.
Mm-hmm.
In your subconscious, you're trying to do what you felt like you had the control to do. So how did that play out for you in that moment, in that season in school and life? What did that look like?
So, of course, I had to make straight A's. And I even got to the point to where if I didn't make hundreds, it would really bother me. So
Mhm.
it just was in my everyday life. Cheer, had to do everything perfectly. Softball, everything perfectly. And of course, we
Mhm.
know we can't. So I honestly would stay defeated a lot of times
Mm.
because of this persona and this striving. Like I couldn't keep up. Like
Yeah.
that, I do feel like the Lord placed that in us because, of course, when He created us and He created the garden, it was perfection. And that was His intention.
Right.
But then, of course, we messed it up. Sin came into the world. And so ever since then, I said, eventually we're going to get there. But in the meantime,
Yeah.
it's a struggle because that's what we want because that's what He instilled in us. But
Yeah.
I'm not going to be able to achieve that here
Mhm.
in the middle of the two gardens.
So I want to add something there about the garden, because you were saying, that was his intention, but then sin entered, and one day we will be there where every tear is wiped, and we will be there in that full redemption, that inheritance that we're promised.
Yeah.
Um, but I also think about sometimes those consequences that he gave in the garden and how like he looked, is it the serpent's cursed and the ground is cursed, but
But
not man
not,
and woman.
yeah.
And he looks at the woman and it looks at Eve, and she's gonna have pain in childbearing. And also child rearing,
Oh, yes.
also
Like
child
add that to
raising.
the list.
Is that the childbirth pain, or is that the toil and the work? I'm not sure. It kind
Yeah,
of
because now
marries the
there's
two.
epidurals and
Yeah,
drugs for the other. So
that's
thank you,
right.
Lord.
Yeah. But it's like he gives her that hardship, but it's hardship that doesn't revoke the blessing.
Yes.
And he gives Adam toil, but he doesn't take fulfilling work. And so, like, in both of those things, there's blessing that he doesn't say, fine, you're not getting any of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, he could have.
Yeah.
He could have, and he could still do that with us, but he doesn't. And at the same time, even in those consequences, his heart is good because it increases our dependence on him.
Yes.
Like, everything in my life that has struggle, that has toil, makes me depend on him.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're going to see in your story, you're a very capable person. You're driven. You're going to get back up. You're going to bounce back. You're going to do everything in your power. And like, what a tragedy it would have been had he allowed you to do that all the
Mm-hmm.
time. You know?
Yeah, for sure.
Um, And I also, so this is the second thing that I want to say here. And I'm curious if it felt like this to you, but when you have like the idol of perfectionism, and it's not just an idol, it's your identity almost without
Mhm.
knowing it, it's kind of perpetuated because you're performing up here, you're meeting these goals, and then you're getting praised for it,
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah.
And so it's like, well, this is what,
It's addicting.
yeah, yes. And I think, I mean, my story is different, but I've definitely struggled with the same things. It can be very like high achieving and very wanting to strive and wanting to have it all together in some regards. I mean, I think I've always probably been a little bit of a hot mess, so I'm not sure if that totally um but you know, like and to some extent, but at the same time, like I think as an adult when things are totally outside of my control, like my children and their salvation and
Mhm.
a lot of large things ahead of us that are totally there's nothing I can do about that other than what I can pour in, you know, and
Mhm.
or this podcast. I mean, I've given this podcast everything I have. And I'm like this morning, like as I wept, I journaled, like, Lord, I don't have the finances to pour into this situation. I don't have the energy to pour into this situation. I don't have extra time. I don't even know if I have a mustard seed, honestly, today. But I have to believe that what I can give you here is worth more in your kingdom than it is in mine.
Absolutely.
I mean, you know, like,
Yeah.
but all that to say, like, as an adult, when I've hit those moments, like, I have no problem striving and even doing the Lord's work,
Mhm. Yeah.
like doing His work. But I have had a hard time just being with
Mhm.
him.
Yeah. Be still.
Yes, like I when I went to counseling last year, it was because I was like, okay, like I know he's my I know he's the good shepherd, but is he my shepherd? You know?
Mhm.
Is he and the disconnect I had, and I don't know if you can relate to this with perfectionism and bouncing back and forth between because I feel like perfectionism bounces back and forth between the challenge, the defeat, and the striving, the success.
Mhm.
And there's really not in between.
Yeah.
And so like I had no problem viewing him as God of the mountain. Totally like he is the he is the gift giver, he's the healer, he's gives blessings, he's good, and I have no problem seeing him as God of the valley. He's with us when we
Mhm.
walk through all of those hardships, but when we're just walking in the pasture, I'm like, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
You know, are you here? Have you forgotten me? Like I have no idea how to just be,
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah.
And it makes you feel I think useless and forgotten and what
Yeah.
is this, you
Well,
know?
and it's vulnerability. Like, who wants to be vulnerable? Who wants to
Nobody.
be like, I can't do this?
Yeah.
And so, but of course, there's intentionality there, and that's whenever we have to be intentional. We have to still
Mhm.
sit with him, and we have to dig into his word, and we have to. I'll just start saying who he is,
Yeah.
like who his character is.
Mm.
Like, Lord, you are faithful, you are good, you are King of Kings, Lord of Lords, you are creator of all things. Like,
Mhm.
you are for me,
Yeah.
you love me. And so I might not know what's going on right now, but I'm going to trust you. And if I say that enough and I dig into his truth enough, like I'm going to start believing that again.
Yeah.
And because he is faithful and he honors that and he blesses that, it's
Yeah.
just getting to that point
I know.
because I don't want to a lot of times.
Yeah.
I don't want to admit my faults. I don't want to admit
Mhm.
that, I'm just sometimes can't do it and I'm not the best.
Yeah.
Just like my kids with ball and things, like I'm
Yeah.
so competitive. I want them to be the best, but why?
Mhm.
Like, I'm saying I want them to learn the discipline and the
Mhm.
hard work ethics and
Mhm.
all the things, teamwork with ball, but then when it comes down to it,
Mm.
it's, in me again and I'm
Do you think
acting
that part
crazy.
of that competitiveness as a parent, like, because that's so common, and a
Mhm.
lot of people aren't willing to admit it, but
Mhm.
it's so prevalent. Do you think that part of that, like, deep down is wanting to protect them from feelings of failure?
Yeah, maybe so.
Like, that feeling of,
Yeah.
like, I know how I felt when I
Yeah.
didn't feel like enough,
Yeah.
and I don't want them to feel that way.
Yeah. And like, just like you don't want your kids to make the same mistakes you did.
Right.
You want to protect them.
Yeah.
But I have to remember, like, they have to learn too,
Mhm.
you know, and God loves them way more than I love them, which is
Yeah.
crazy
Yeah.
to even think about. But
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, none of us would pick our refinement.
no, for sure.
Or our children's refinement, but it's always works out to the good.
That's right.
So your perfectionism is at play in your life with stray days, kind of overcompensating in your family, I would say,
Mhm.
for some of the hardships. Now fast forward to freshman year. Were y'all kind of settled in? I mean, I know at some point things kind of to turn around, at least circumstantially.
Yes. It
Everybody's kind of found their place.
Yes, it took a little while, but I was on drill team
Yeah.
at I was going to Riverfields where I was going
Yeah.
in Rayville, and so of course my mom tells them, and I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. So I was on drill team my freshman year, first year there,
Yeah.
and so I met people through that. And then, of course, we were able to play softball. And so I feel like we did like fit in.
Yeah.
Like it didn't take long.
Right.
Because obviously, like we like to talk and we're going to like meet people.
Gonna be involved,
Yeah, we're
one
going to
way or
be
another.
involved.
Okay. And then, you met a guy. And so how did that look during that season? How was that impactful to you?
So first of all, I was a freshman and he was a senior.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, why did my parents let me date him? Anyways, so I loved his family. His family was fantastic. And so we started dating and I did things that I should not have been doing. And after what my family had just went through, I couldn't believe that I actually was taking that risk.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so just and again, living for Jesus on Sundays. My family was always in church. But then in this part of our lives, it's the first time I've ever seen my daddy not go to church, which was very hard. I mean, we would visit around, but I was so used to my daddy being at church all the time. He was either studying, the word just all the time. And so that was very hard. And so I feel like maybe I did rebel a little bit, even though I wanted to be perfect. It was a hidden thing. Like nobody knew,
Right.
Nobody knew what I was doing.
Yeah.
And, of course, that's so naive to think about now, but,
yeah.
So I would just go out on Friday and Saturday nights and then be in church on Sundays and even sing, we would sing because, Blake, hello, hint, hint, plug, shameless plug for me. I do want to be in the praise band, but he'll never let me.
You can just sing now. This can be your audition and we'll just.
Okay, look, you're making me real nervous now. I cannot accept failure. So we dated all throughout high school, on and off.
Yeah.
It wasn't like it was going to end up anywhere. The choices I made, I do regret, but I did learn through those things. And I know that the Lord, looking back, I can see the Lord in every part of my story. He would always draw me back. Something would speak to me in church, or we would go to a youth conference, and and then I'd try to be on the straight and narrow, but then I'd always fall back. And so I didn't understand that. And so that's when I started doubting my salvation. Like, Lord, I don't understand. I love you, but I don't want to give up this part of me.
Yeah.
And so why?
I was listening to, I believe it was a reverend on the Perrys, 30 Minutes with the Perrys, or maybe it's just called With the Perrys now, but Jackie Hill Perry and Preston Perry. And they were asking him about the deconstruction of the faith. We see that a lot. We hear that word, people deconstructing their faith. And he was like, sometimes like what your faith was built on wasn't real. And so like that deconstructing and then building the proper, it on the proper foundation can be a good thing. And people do have stories, but they were just asking like, why do you, like, what are the reasons that you see people do that? And he was like, well, maybe when somebody you had on a pedestal fell, and you saw them fail and that uprooted your foundation, or it was based on the wrong things, and so when things got hard, you know, you didn't have the foundation to stand on or whatever. But he said 99.9% of the times deconstruction starts with morality. You just don't want to.
Yeah.
You don't want to because you want what you want. And like that, in big ways and in small ways, we can all relate to that.
Oh, yeah. For me, selfishness was definitely,
yeah.
If I want to do it, I'm going to do it. And if I want it, I'm going to go get it.
Well, I mean, the more I study this idea, the more I think like we're either glorifying God or we're glorifying self.
Yep.
You know, like that's might not be a conscious thought, but it is, you know, it is.
Yeah,
and
sure.
They're two totally different things and they work in totally different ways,
Yeah.
you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's so good. And I think so you kind of start this chasm of like, I believe this, I know you, but I'm also chasing after this, you know. And I think sometimes like people can feel defensive of their past because they're like, well, I wasn't living in sin because I love the Lord. It's like, well, when you look in the Old Testament, like there are passages where it said they feared the Lord and they served idols.
Yep.
You know,
yeah.
like you, but you have to fear the Lord and serve the Lord.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so like, and that's all of us forever in our sanctification. You know what I mean?
It's a process.
Yes. But I love your ability to go like, this wasn't right, but here's what is, you know? And I think that's huge. I think when it says put off your past self, like you don't have to be loyal to that past self. Like you've been given a new self.
That's right.
To put on in his righteousness.
Yep.
You know? Thank goodness we don't have to be loyal to.
Oh goodness, yes.
You know?
I don't want to go back to those days.
So you're you know, doing church, getting plugged in, but also feeling like I also want to chase after these things of the world that probably for a long time you had not even looked at because you were following the rules and you were doing this. So, okay, tell us about graduating, kind of your plans as far as college and so on and so forth.
So I always knew what I wanted to do. Like I said, I always knew I wanted to be a nurse anesthetist. I can remember visiting my mom. She worked in the OR for years, and I would see them. They used to carry around fanny packs back then, and who'd have thought they're back? And so I'm like, who are those people? And mom's like, well, they help people. To not feel pain during their surgeries. And I'm like, really? I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to be that.
Yeah.
And so I always knew what I wanted to do. So I had a plan. Like I was going to graduate, go to nursing school. You have to do that first, and then work in the ICU. And then I was going to go back to grad school for nurse anesthesia. And so we're bebopping along, and I graduate valedictorian of high school because, you know, had to do that.
Had to.
And I started school, and then I met a boy. This time this boy was different, and also different because he came with an ankle bracelet.
Hey, tell us the ankle bracelet.
So the kind that you can't go past your parents' driveway or it'll go off because you had an 8 p.m. curfew. So
was that really what it was for? 8 p.m. curfew?
Oh, yeah.
Like his parents gave it to him?
No, the law gave it to him.
Sorry, we're out here telling all Chad's business.
Yeah, sorry, honey, but you know,
he's not here. You can say whatever you got him. I'm just kidding. Just kidding.
So I met him, and I met him through a mutual friend, and he had just gotten back. He had gotten in trouble, and his story is his story, but he had served some time.
Yeah.
And so I met him when he came back. And what's funny is we knew each other, like we didn't know each other, I guess I should say. We had the same friends. And he was in the same fraternity as my boyfriend at the time. And it was crazy how we do not remember each other.
That's
Once
crazy.
again, God's timing, because I would not have liked him then. I'm just saying. And so he gets back, and I meet him. And that first night, like I laughed until my stomach hurt. I was like, okay, there's something different about this dude.
Yeah.
And so we started dating, and he finally got to move into his grandfather's house that his parents had redone. And so, of course, that led to me staying over there. And then 3 days after my 21st birthday, I found out that I was pregnant.
Mm.
And that was really hard.
Yeah.
You know, and I knew, I mean, what my family had gone through, and also embarrassment. Like, how could this
Yeah.
happen again?
Yeah.
Like, in my family, my daddy's a preacher. I'm supposed to be this perfect child.
Mm.
I took my birth control faithfully. Like, how did this happen?
Mm.
It was really devastating. And then Chad, from his point of view, he had just gotten out of trouble.
Yeah.
And so he was like, I don't want to disappoint my parents again.
Yeah.
And so he did ask me to think about having an abortion.
Mm.
And I mean, I honestly, I hate to admit that it did cross my mind that this would be easy. You know,
Yeah.
I am about to start nursing school.
Yeah.
You know, I have all these things going on that this does not fit my plan.
Mm.
And our older sister, we say she's the normal one. She called me and she said, Kelley, please don't do that. You know,
Mm.
she was older. She's 7 years older than me and 5 years older than Casey. And so she lived that too. And she was like, you can't do that. And I knew, I was like, I know I can't do that. And so, of course, I can't even think about it. And Chad also said something when Luke graduated, when he walked across that stage, like what if we wouldn't have gotten to experience him? And, how selfish that was, and so thankful for God's protection, and us not carrying through with that.
And also more redemption from Casey's story.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yes,
if you had not walked in Casey's story with her, would your decision have been different?
Yeah,
you know?
Wow, I never thought about it like that.
I mean,
yeah,
like it's just more good from what the enemy meant for evil.
That's right.
Um,
yes.
And I know, like, Chad was talking to us Wednesday night dinner, and we were like, is Kelley ready? And he was like, oh yeah, and Andrew was messing with him. You're gonna be next, We love to threaten that, and
So everybody's like avoiding y'all like the plague.
for sure. Like that's how we get anyone here is threats.
I mean, the Lord don't have anything to do with it.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, yeah, he helps. Yeah. But we were like, Andrew was kind of messing with him and stuff. And I don't even know. I mean, like we were joking because Andrew and Chad, I mean, they be serious? I don't know.
Right?
But but somehow like it turned to him saying like when you shared your story, I guess in your life group, maybe like in the last life group, maybe, that you were like, I mean, should I put this in there, And he was like, yes. I mean, I hate that it's a part of our story, but yeah, because if it helps one person,
That's right.
then yes. Like, and that's really just a really selfless and brave way to view our stories, but that is what we believe here,
Yeah.
And so thank you so much for sharing that. So you have this baby and you're going into nursing school too. What did that look like?
Crazy.
Yeah.
He did not sleep.
Yeah.
Luke did not sleep for probably a good year.
Yeah.
And also we were young and I feel like they can feed off of us. And I was so anxious.
Yeah.
And so that did not help the situation, but thank goodness for my mom. Oh, she was a lifesaver. So I would drive to tech every day for nursing school. And then whenever we started clinicals, it was even earlier. So no sleep.
Yeah.
Luke cried all the time. Like mom said one time she picked him up because I called her. I was like, you've got to come get him. Like, I don't know what to do with him. And she said, and that baby cried all the way from y'all's house to my house. And I thought, ooh, no wonder.
Yeah.
Like, yes. So I also had postpartum. Well, first it started out, I think what people term baby blues.
Yeah.
Your hormones are all out of whack. And I was sad.
Major life change.
Yes. Like this is way different.
Yeah.
And we were used to going and doing what we wanted. I was 21, Chad was 26. This was definitely not something that we thought would happen at that point in our lives. And we were just getting to know each other.
And I'll say this too, like Kelley, this might be getting off into a a different thing, and we're gonna put a pin because we're not gonna forget where you're going because I really want you to talk about this. But um, there is a major dying to self that happens to women
Mm.
when you get pregnant.
Oh, yeah.
Even, I mean, in your story, totally not your plan. There's dying to self of having the baby, of admitting where you're at, and
Mm.
walking that out. There's dying to self of this is not the way that I was going to go to nursing school, and whatever.
Mhm.
There's dying to self of I can't eat these things. I've got to take these vitamins. I gotta schedule this doctor's appointment. I can't miss it. Like
Yeah.
there's all of this. And then when the baby gets here, boy,
Mhm. Oh, yeah.
I mean, it is, you can't eat with two hands. You can't sleep. Whatever your life stage, whatever your circumstances, your life is turned upside down and you have to majorly die to self. And it feels shameful for moms
Mhm.
because it feels like, didn't I listen to the church ladies when they said to savor this, like, and to enjoy it because it
Uh-huh.
passes quickly and it whatever, and like that's so true. It is, but it doesn't lessen the hardship of where you're at.
Oh, yeah.
Again, you can know what you know, but it's okay to weep.
That's right.
Like dying wasn't supposed to feel good,
Yeah.
you know, but it is for our good.
Absolutely.
But I think for men, like I've told Andrew, because like Andrew is one of the most selfless people I know truly, but I'm like, I don't envy your position because you have to choose to die with me. Like you don't like
Yeah.
I'm nursing and I have to change the way I eat and I have to change the way whatever, and because this will make the baby fussy and this whatever, and but like you have to choose it, and I don't know if I could choose it if I didn't have to.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes like for men, like the dying of their hobbies later is kind of baby blues, but
Oh, for
it's
sure.
but it's not immediate.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like, because you'll hear men be like, well, I just don't have a hobby. And I'm like, name a wife that has a hobby.
Yeah.
you know? Like,
That
like
comes later.
any wife that has a hobby, but it's like, I think sometimes men can compare themselves to other men of like, well, this person has all this time to do a hobby or whatever. And, but it's like, well, but your partner is your wife. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like, what are
Yeah.
y'all, anyway,
Yeah.
that's just something I have been pondering lately. So,
Yeah.
but you have this total life change because it
Mhm.
wasn't your plan. You're young, you throw marriage in there
Oh, yeah. We
that
weren't
wasn't
married yet.
planned. Yeah. And then um nursing school, now you have baby blues. How, like, did you know that's where you were at? I mean, were you just like, I just have to muscle through this?
At 14 years old, I had to push through.
Yeah.
That was when all that happened in our family, and I could not be okay. And
Yeah.
so I still struggle with not understanding how people don't just push through. And so I was not going to ask for help. I
Yeah.
was going to get through this because I could do it.
Yeah.
And I couldn't. And
Yeah.
so we ended up getting married.
Mhm.
Got through all of that, which, by the way, when I was saying my vows, Luke did cry the entire time. I'm just saying.
We're starting out with for better and for worse.
Yes. So like, okay. We did it backwards, but okay. But also I didn't want to miss out on, I didn't touch on this, but
Yeah.
when Luke was born,
Mhm.
that's when I truly understood God's grace.
Mm.
Like my sin, sex outside of marriage,
Mhm.
caused me to get pregnant before I was married.
Mhm.
But then he was born and he was perfect.
Yeah.
He was not only beautiful and biased because I'm his mama, um,
Mhm.
but there was not one thing wrong with him. And I'm like, goodness, that is undeserved favor from the
Mhm.
Lord. Like, thank
Mhm.
you so much for this blessing
Yeah.
because all blessings come from him. And I think that's when I truly understood, like, wow,
Yeah.
you are really good, Lord.
Tim Keller once said that sin is anything that causes the human race not to flourish. Like we can get so caught up
Mhm.
on specific sins, but it's like sin is you putting your eyes on your stress over the Lord's peace. I mean,
Yeah.
like it's it's missing the mark. It's anything that causes you not to flourish, and the heart of God, his will is against sin because it's against you not being able to flourish. But like, what an amazing story that he would give you a way to flourish despite that sin.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yep. So baby blues, and I think your note said that turned into postpartum depression. You felt like, did you notice a shift there before things got worse?
I don't think so. I really don't, because I was trying to think about this when I told my story. I think I was just so busy and had so much on my plate that I didn't recognize that until I would drive, like I said, to tech every day. And I mean, I still can remember that I thought there was a little boy that would ride with me to school, and we would have conversations every day. And then I was like, wait, that's not normal. And so finally,
how did you realize that's not normal?
I mean, the Lord Sandy gave me clarity, like, this isn't. And so I called my mom, and I was like, okay.
Were you mentioning that to anybody?
No. No, because I was like, this is crazy. Like, am I crazy? Is something wrong with me? Because back then, postpartum depression was not really a thing that was talked about.
And then postpartum psychosis is even more rare. I mean, we still don't know a lot about, I don't know a lot about it. You know what I mean?
And so mom was like, oh my goodness, yes, no, Kelley, that's not normal. And so at first, of course, she's like, oh my gosh, like, are you schizophrenic? And I'm like, oh my gosh, am I schizophrenic? And we're like freaking out. Like, okay, no. So that couple, like everything, it was just like a domino effect. The sleep deprivation, I think, like really pushed me over the edge. And anyway, so hence why we didn't have a kid. Number one, I wanted to have, go to anesthesia school. One kid was going to be tough enough. So we didn't have any more kids. I was scared to death. For the longest time. Because I was like, I can't do that again.
How did you, like, when you look back, how did you get out?
Rest was like a huge deal. Getting help, like my mom, thank goodness. I can't say enough about what my mom has done. But I was not to the point to where, thank goodness, it wasn't where I was going to harm my child. Like, I still had that. I can remember times of having to put Luke in his crib, shut the door, and walk away. But some women don't have that when they're out of control like that.
They're in psychosis. That's so hard. But also neat that you had that protection and even in it. So you do finish nursing school. Am I jumping ahead? Am I skipping anything?
Oh, no.
You do finish nursing school, and then is that when y'all moved to Baton Rouge?
Yes, for anesthesia school. So I worked. I had to transfer to Louisiana Tech. You could get your associate RN there. And so I got that. Well, then I had to have my bachelor's to go back to school. And so I worked nights and
went to school, married, have a toddler. How old would he have been then?
Yes. Like, that was over a period of 2 years. And so at that point, if anybody knew us back then, they probably are shocked that we're still together. We had a come to Jesus meeting. Like, we were fighting. We would belittle each other, even in front of people. We were both stressed. And Chad was trying to go back to school too. And it was just hard. And so we finally sat down and we're like, okay, either we're going to try to work this out or we're going to have to part ways. And I'm so thankful, once again, God's hand in it. And both of our parents have been married over 50 something years. And so we just knew divorce was not an option. And I can remember Casey telling me that don't ever leave, Kelley. And this has been so important in my marriage all throughout these years, because the next time it'll just get easier and easier to eventually you will not go back. And so that always replayed in the back of my head. And two, again, like, I'm not going to accept defeat, And so that's one thing that God used for good and being trying to have the perfect persona. I will not get divorced,
Right. Yeah.
That was my thought process back then.
Yeah. So, okay, when was it that you said, like, Luke would be up with you while you're studying and
Oh,
stuff.
so
Was
that was when
that
we moved to Baton
season?
Rouge.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
What did that look like? Like,
So Chad, of course, was Mr. Mom.
Yeah.
He had to, you couldn't miss clinical, you couldn't miss. So he had to do everything, get Luke to school. And I did love, like, when we moved to Baton Rouge, like, I didn't have my mom, I didn't have my sister.
Right.
And so all we had was each other.
yeah.
And so,
Do you think that prompted that come to Jesus meeting you talked about? Like,
Oh,
okay,
yeah.
this is where the rubber hits the road because we can't like
yes. And
we can't just like ignore it
that's
at
right.
this point.
And in my selfishness too, I knew I wanted to go back to school and I was going to do it with
Yeah.
or without, like
Yeah.
Chad. And I hate to even admit that, but thank goodness he was on board.
Yeah.
But that's just where I was
Yeah.
at that point. And so thank goodness, once again, God kept us together, went down there. And so Luke, he would go to school and then he would come home and he had to have been tired. He
Yeah.
would sit
We
because
probably napped at
Oh,
school,
yeah,
you know.
true.
He was probably
and
ready
so
to
he
go.
would sit with me and I would sit and study like sometimes well past midnight.
Yeah.
So he was my study buddy, and it was a joke between Chad used to say all the time he and Luke should have gotten an honorary degree
Yeah.
because I study out loud.
For sure.
And he's like, I feel like I could put somebody to sleep now. And we used to get so tickled. I'm like, yeah, okay. So yeah, late nights. He was mom's little
Yes.
study buddy, and I would call him my tutor bugs, and he'll probably kill me
Oh,
for saying that out
that's
loud.
awesome. We'll tag him as that.
Yeah, okay.
No, just kidding. So you then you graduated school with a 4.0 in all of that.
Yeah,
That's crazy town.
it is.
Like, that's
But
truly crazy.
when you're determined and you're goal oriented and you put your mind to something, you can do it, and you're gonna do it because there's no other option.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Until there's not.
Until there's not. And the Lord's teaching me that. Like, it's very humbling following Jesus. I'm just going to throw that out there.
That'll be a part 2. We can't cover that part today. We haven't figured it out yet. So you find a job in Jackson, right? Were you trying to get as close as you could back to home? Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that was the closest you found.
That was the closest. There were no full-time jobs here at that time. And so we moved to a part of Jackson called Brandon because you can't really live in Jackson. You always have to live on the outskirts.
Yeah.
And so we bought the house before we actually moved there, but everybody I worked with lived in Madison, which is opposite direction. And so we were there a couple of years and decided that we were going to build a house. But also at this time, I'm 30. Everybody else is having babies. And so I come home one day from work and I'm like, honey, I want to have a kid. And he's like laughing, ha ha ha. I'm like, no, I'm serious.
Yeah.
I wanted a do-over. Like, I wanted to be excited. Like, I wanted this to be something that was planned.
Yeah.
And so we tried for about 8 months. And finally, I was just like, okay, well, apparently it's not the Lord's will.
Yeah.
So whatever. So we went to New Orleans for our 10-year anniversary and we came back with a souvenir. And Chad wanted to name him Nola, but no, not happening. His name is Sam.
I love it. I love it. Now Sam and Martha, does she go by Martha Kate? Okay. They're a year apart?
20 months apart.
20 months apart. Okay. And was that planned?
No.
Okay.
So we're building our house and we're almost done. I think it was November I found it. It was right after.
Yeah.
Or right before Sam's birthday. Anyways, and we found out we were pregnant again.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely not planned.
Yeah.
Because you got to remember, Luke was almost 10. Like, you got to think about how he's self-sufficient.
Yeah.
I don't know how old's your oldest.
He's about to be 9.
Okay.
So yeah, he's almost there. But yeah, we were back to back to back with all of ours. So it was, we're just now tasting self-sufficiency in all of them at one time.
Yes. So we had Luke who was self-sufficient.
Yeah. And to go back.
Yeah. I don't recommend that. But,
yeah. That's hard.
Anyway, so he rocked our world. But he was the sweetest. We used to call him, his nickname was Sweet Sam Goodman.
Oh.
And so he's kind of going through the change right now. So I'm ready for my Sweet Sam to come back. But he is not Sweet Sam right now. Thank goodness I went through this with Luke and I know now, like, he's going to come back around. They come back around.
Yes. I feel like they do that multiple times at different ages, you know.
So we built our house and
Yeah.
we moved in, and we were the only house on our street.
Yeah.
And then kind of catty corner across the street were some people starting to build.
Mm-hmm.
And they were fantastic people.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to, portray them as otherwise, but they were just in a different season.
Right.
And so Chad and the husband became good friends.
Mm-hmm.
And so every evening they, hang out.
Yeah.
Drink beer.
Yeah.
And here I was, had Martha Kate and Sam working full time.
Mm-hmm.
Chad was going a lot during the week.
And Luke still has some needs.
Oh, you had to tote him around wherever he needed to go.
Right. Yeah.
Thank goodness our neighborhood had a pond because he loved to fish.
Yeah.
And so that occupied his time.
Mm-hmm.
So I ended up being very, every time the knock on the door would come at night, I would get so angry.
Yeah.
And Chad would go off. And now in the summertime, Chad would have Sam too, and he would go with him.
Yeah.
And so you would have a 2-year-old out.
Yeah.
Way past midnight, sometimes 2:00 in the morning with guys running around the neighborhood.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Not some of our finest moments.
Well, and just like the resentment that
oh yeah,
anger builds into,
and bitterness.
Because like on one hand you can see like that Chad's, I don't want to say followed your plans, but like he's made the moves and he's done the things, and so I'm sure there's resentment on his side at this point, but then also of what we kind of talked about with like there's the resentment of like I've had to die to self and you didn't choose to die with me. And that's all just really, really hard.
It is so hard. And so that's why I love like young parents who have small kids. I'm like, y'all, it is a tough season. But if you can just trust in the Lord.
Yes.
Get around a community of godly people who are going through the same season and have a mentor who's already been through it and see that you are going to overcome. You're going to get through it. But it's tough. And when you're in the moment, you can't see past that. And so he's out all night and gone a lot during the week, traveling with his job. Finally, I was like, I'm done. I want to go back home. And I had a friend text me. There were always job opportunities here at home.
Yeah.
Throughout the 5 years we were gone to Mississippi, but it was never the right time.
Yeah.
And so I knew, and so we talked about it, and I told Chad, she had texted me and said there was a job coming up.
Yeah.
If I would contact their boss and, they'd love to have me back. And so I was like, okay, so Chad and I talked about it. And we prayed about it, and we also made a pros and cons list.
Yeah.
But those kind of outweighed each other. But I wanted to be back, and Chad did not want to come back. And I was on my way to work that Monday morning. I went to interview, was offered the job, and I was on my way to work that Monday because we still hadn't decided. And I'm praying like, Lord, I just want to follow your will. Because even though I wasn't wholeheartedly, fully serving the Lord at that time, like I still sought him out. Unfortunately, it was when I needed something.
Yeah.
But I still knew where my help came from and that I wanted to follow him.
Right.
And so I was just praying. And in the middle of my prayer, I knew I had gotten a text. And I was like, Lord, just show us what we need to do because I don't know. I don't want to mess this up. And so when I got done praying, it was my now boss who texted and said, the job is yours if you want it. And so I was like, Chad, I just feel like that's the Lord, like the timing of it all. Like, I feel like we need to go back home.
Yeah.
And so I moved. Luke still had like a month or two left of school. And so I moved with, call them the littles because we're, got a grown and then littles.
It. Yeah.
And so we moved to Monroe, and Chad was going to stay with Luke to finish out school. Well, then that turned into, I need to keep the house up because the house hadn't sold. And so we were kind of living separate for at least a good 2 or 3 months.
Yeah.
And finally, I came to visit one weekend, and I saw our neighbors on right next to us, and we were just outside talking.
Yeah.
And the wife was like, I can't believe that Chad's still here. And I'm like, he's having to keep up the yard and people are coming to see the house. And I mean, honestly, I really didn't think much about it.
Yeah.
And because I was at home, I had my mom, I had help. Like, it honestly was so nice.
Well, and it sounds like y'all had kind of gotten to a place that you maybe didn't even recognize at the time that was kind of emotionally estranged to some degree. So it was like, not necessarily being used to lean on each other in the way that you would miss when you moved. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. And so she said, yeah, we've been talking, and we're like, ooh, Kelley is much better than us, because there is no way that I would let my husband stay here while I'm over raising my kids somewhere else. And I was like, girl, I saw red.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my gosh, I look like a laughing stock to these people,
Oh, yeah.
And so, of course, I worry what people think about me.
Yeah.
And needless to say, Chad was back home that following week in Monroe with us.
Yeah.
And so we lived with my parents because our house still hadn't sold.
Right.
And so every weekend we had a built-in babysitter.
Right.
And so that led to us going out here and, doing the little drinking thing and still going to church on Sundays, but never involved.
Yeah. And I'm sure there's a part too that felt like I've earned this, like I deserve this because I was robbed of being able to just be in college and not have a baby and a marriage, and like there's probably like we can just rationalize things so well when we feel like we've sacrificed, and again it goes back to that, but are we serving God, or are we serving self, So y'all are doing that, but when did y'all get plugged in with North Monroe?
So we were going, that's where Chad's parents were members. We were going there. My daddy still pastored a church in Transylvania, but it was hard making that commute. And it's older church, and so there wasn't really kids. And so we knew we needed to be where our kids are and for them to grow in a good children's ministry. And so we started going to North Monroe. And then March of 2019 is when my sister got asked to go on a retreat. And she was like, well, if I'm going, you're going to go, because we do everything together. Everybody knows that. Like, it's a joke. Like, Chad, when he married me, he married Casey too. No, okay, really, it's not sister wives, I promise. But we're just so close. We talk all the time. She's my bestie. And so we went. And I can remember sitting there, and we didn't go to North Monroe. We went with New Life in Bastrop. It was a smaller retreat. But Leslie Bush had asked Casey to go. And so she said, I want y'all to go. And it's like a smaller one. And so it was good. It was real intimate. So I'm sitting there, and I knew that I knew that the Lord had something more. And I had all this time prayed for my husband too. I had prayed because my daddy was a spiritual leader. That's all I knew. And I knew that was biblical. And I knew that if I didn't make our kids go to church, nobody would go to church. And I knew that wasn't what God had for us. And so I would pray for Chad to grow closer to the Lord, and for him to be that spiritual leader all those years. And anyway, so I'm sitting there and I'm listening to women pray with boldness, and I'm listening to stories. And honestly, I was sitting there thinking, I'm such a brat. Like, I'm so blessed. And what am I doing with my life? And still, I can remember, I know the Lord has a sense of humor because he was laughing, but I also was like, but I don't want to give up my life. Like, I liked wine back then. Like, I liked getting a little buzz. Being overserved, I liked that. It made me not have to realize the reality around me and what's going on.
It mimicked the feeling of surrender and peace, because I'm getting to forget about my troubles right now. I'm like this, and it's in a way I can control. It's when I want to, not when I don't. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I just don't think I can do that. And by the end of that retreat, I literally had laid everything down. And I knew that was something that was going to be an issue, of course, because that's such a gray area in Christianity about the drinking thing. But when I came home, I left there revived. I left there renewed. I had doubted my salvation for so long. And then I realized that what I had done wrong was I was riding on my parents' faith.
Yeah.
I had to have faith of my own.
Yeah.
I had to dig into God's word. I had to know why I believe what I believe, not just because my daddy told me that.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's when I really started a relationship with Jesus.
Yeah.
And so I come home and I'm just on this high. And
Yeah.
we joke like, ain't no high like the most high. But it's true. Like I had an encounter with Christ.
Yeah.
And it changed me. He
Yeah.
literally changed me. And so I love retreats. It's not the retreat that does it. I don't want to glorify a retreat at all, but it did get me away from this world and it brought me to the feet of Jesus. And that's where I surrendered everything to him.
Yeah.
And so it was such a special time. But when I got back, I'm thinking my marriage is going to be restored.
Yeah.
It is about to be the perfection that I've always wanted.
Yeah.
And boy, was I wrong.
Yeah.
It was polar opposite.
And like that feeling of like, I want, like that moment you kind of had, or the way you said it of like, okay, I know that I want this, but I still like these things. And like, we've talked about that, fearing the God and serving idols, and doing this too. Like it's been there since the beginning of time,
Yeah.
They're walking, talking in the garden, and they're taking of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like we're not incapable because we're walking with him of looking to non-permissible trees,
Yeah.
But that it just reminds me of like when scripture talks about the unbelief of the people, whenever he says like many even of the authorities believed, but because of fear of the Pharisees, they did not confess it.
Yeah.
So that they wouldn't be put out of the synagogue. They didn't want to lose their position. They didn't want to lose that success. They didn't want to lose the status that they had with the Pharisees. And so they didn't confess it. And it says that they loved the glory that comes from man more than the glory that comes from God. And so their unbelief was not in who he was. It was not in what he said he would do. It was not that he wasn't going to cast out the ruler of this world. It was that what you're offering me would be worth what I'd have to give up to gain that. And like, that's always the question of our unbelief. Like, if I turn loose of this, like, are you gonna let me drown?
Yep.
Are you gonna leave me out here to flail? Like, do you have good plans for me?
Yep.
So you have that full surrender moment. Go home, expect a fairy tale. It's not. And then do you feel like for a split moment there, it caused a divide between y'all?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I can remember specifically, I had started Priscilla Shire's Armor of God study.
Yes, so good.
So good.
So good.
And so I just had, our kids are still little at this point. And so I was trying to finish a video.
Yeah.
And Chad walked in the room and he was like, I can't do this. I need help. And I was like, let me just finish this video. And he's like, you're taking this Jesus thing a little too far.
Yeah.
And I was like crushed.
Yeah.
I was like, Lord, why did you let me experience you like I did and to come home to this?
Yeah.
Like, I didn't understand spiritual warfare at all, but goodness, have I walked through it for the past, I guess it's about to be 6 years.
Yeah.
And so that was not good. That broke me.
Yeah.
And so we had started going to a life group at this time because someone had asked, but we still weren't like, Chad wasn't all in, of course. And I was kind of getting a little defeated.
Yeah, sure.
And so we go to our first meeting for the next retreat because that would have been my first one to team.
Gotcha.
And
this would have been going into 2020, right? Or would this have been 2019
fall?
Okay.
Fall of 2019.
Gotcha.
And so we had finished our meeting. We all got in a circle and we're praying.
Yeah.
And I was just sobbing and I didn't know. I was like, I don't know why. Like that snot and like sobbing. I'm like, these people are probably going to think, what is wrong with this girl?
And you love public crying so much.
So much. And I didn't really know these people,
Yeah.
And so, I'm literally like sobbing and I just kept hearing over and over, I am. I am. And I'm like, okay, I am. Like, I don't know what you're trying to tell me, Lord.
Mm-hmm.
And so we get done and we're all kind of talking outside. And I was in another, like, we were in little groups, and I could overhear one of my friends talking about they were doing the Finding I Am study. And I'm like, that's what he's trying to tell me. Like, I need to do this study. And so I get home, I order it, it comes in, and it sits there for 2 months.
Yeah.
And then we go to church one Sunday, and Chad is still not on board. He does not want this new lifestyle. And they mention men's retreat coming up. And I'm like, well, this is perfect. Like, he needs to go on this.
Fits right into my plans.
So I signed him up. And I was like, okay, Lord, I'm going to sign him up. But Lord, I'm going to let you do the work. Okay. I'm going to plant this seed, and I'm going to let you take over. Because, that's how it works and all.
Yeah.
And so then he got in. And I was like, uh-oh. So now I got to tell him he got in.
Yeah. Yeah.
That he didn't even know he was going to go on a retreat, because he didn't even sign up for a retreat.
The good news is you won.
Yeah.
The bad news is.
Bad news is, but I did say, look, you don't have to go.
Yeah.
But I would like for you to go. And so he did. He went. Now, if looks could kill when we dropped him off, I wouldn't be sitting here in this chair right now. And he did. When he introduced himself, he said, I told him I'm here because my wife signed me up.
Yeah.
And he had a good weekend. But like, I was like so ready. I was thinking it was going to be exactly like my experience.
A magic fix. Yeah. Yeah.
And it wasn't. And I was devastated, because I was like, oh, I just thought he would come home and be on fire like I was. And not that he didn't have a good weekend. He did. He had a good weekend with the Lord. And so I spent that entire rest of that day crying.
Well, and think about it, like for you, like, look at all the ways that we've seen the Lord chase you over and over in your life, but still holding on to the world. Okay, well, now there's this blessing. Okay, but still chasing after the world. And so in the place that that was the final straw and you met your surrender, it can feel like, man, if people don't find it here, they'll never find it. Because that's how it was in your story.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
And so it can feel like not just retreat specifically, but just anything, this study that you love, this book that you loved, this pastor, this church, whatever, you can feel like this is gonna be the only method,
Yes.
like,
yes.
and that does feel disheartening.
Yes. And then I felt bad, because I'm like, here I am crying. He's like, did I do something wrong?
Yeah.
And I'm like, no. And so that night I literally got on my face and I was like, Lord, I say that I surrender everything, but my marriage is yours. I cannot fix this. He is not mine. And at that moment I was like, well, I don't even really want him to be mine, but Lord, he is yours.
Yeah.
And so I'm giving him to you. And I knew that night I had not started that study, and it had been 2 months. And I knew that's when I needed to start that study. I was like, okay, Lord, I forgot about that. Let me go ahead and do this, because I know you spoke this to me. And when I started that study, he was talking directly to me. Just the first video, every day I would sit at my kitchen table, and it was a 6-week study. And it was like Jesus was just right there beside me, telling me that I am the great I am.
Yeah.
You have put expectations on your husband that were never meant for him. He would never fulfill that. You have placed him on a pedestal in your heart that was only meant for me, Jesus. And so it was just like, just everything that I was doing wrong. And I'm thinking it's all Chad. Like, he needs to be doing what I want him to be. He needs to be who I want him to be. Well, that wasn't it. Like, my heart had to change. And I had to realize that Jesus is my only satisfaction. He's the only one meant for that place in my heart.
Yeah.
And he completely changed everything about my marriage, speaking to me through that study.
Yeah. Well, when we're bowing down to an idol, we want everyone close to us to bow down to the same idol.
Yeah.
Like, if I'm serving perfectionism, everybody's got to join in this. Everybody's got to jump on board, because this is the way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, like, your full surrender there was you and him, and like your expectations for all that at the same time.
He was supposed to be doing it exactly my way.
Yeah.
At the same time as me. And so I just started praying even harder, like, Lord, for myself, change my heart, like, help
Yeah.
me to see him how you see him.
Yeah.
And two, I love how Brother Bill preached a sermon about how Miss Amy had zero expectations. So I do remember that. And I'm like, you know what? I'm just not going to have any expectations so
Yeah.
that when he does do something, I'm going to be like, oh, that was so nice. Thank you.
Yeah.
So that was funny. But anyways, so I just kept praying. I just kept praying for the Lord to just lead us
Yeah.
and for us to both be on board, because I wanted my kids to be raised in a home like I was. I wanted my kids to serve Jesus and follow Jesus. And I didn't want them to make the same mistakes as me. Not that I can control that, but if I wouldn't have been raised in church, where would I be today?
Yeah.
If I wouldn't have had a praying mama who prayed, and so she was faithful on her knees praying for her girls to get back to the Lord. And it took a lot of years, but the Lord was faithful and he answered those prayers. And so I knew the power of prayer. And I had heard a story about, this was so cool to me. So Billy Graham, when he was young and he was in seminary, I guess they went overseas to England and they were like visiting all the sites that had like theological significance, I guess.
Yeah.
And so there were imprints where John Wesley had prayed beside his bed for revival.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was like a revival movement, the Methodist Church and all the things. And so the Church of England, and they were going to leave, and the professor was looking for Billy Graham. And he went and he was kneeling in that same spot, praying, do it again, Lord, do it again. And look at what the Lord did through the ministry of Billy Graham. And so I'm like, we know the power of prayer. And that really like changed my perspective, changed everything about like praying. Like, I can't do this, but he can. And so I'm just giving it all to him. And even if I don't see it right now, and I might not see things this side of eternity, but I'm going to trust in him and know that he's good and he is working even when I can't see it. And so he just changed my mindset about things. And then slowly over time, I started seeing Chad reading. I'd get up in the morning and he would be reading his Bible. And he was going to Bible studies because the men have a million Bible studies.
Yeah.
And it was just like complete transformation. Not all of a sudden, but I could just slowly see the Lord moving and the Lord working.
Yeah.
And he stopped going and playing golf every Saturday. I had stopped drinking because I knew that that was a conviction that the Lord had placed on my heart. And so that was kind of hard. But then the Lord worked that out. Chad's heart was convicted too. And so the Lord just completely took those desires.
Yeah.
And August of this year was 5 years since I've had any kind of alcohol.
Wow.
Is that not amazing?
That's crazy.
Like,
Yeah.
I just can't believe, because that is something I did not want to give up.
Yeah.
But that was my conviction, and convictions are personal. And that was something I needed to get rid of because I was trying to put that in the place. That was a coping mechanism when I need to bring everything to Jesus.
Yeah.
And so that was a cool thing. Give him all the glory for that.
Yeah.
And we started really getting involved.
Yeah.
And then COVID hit.
Yes. Yeah.
But I have to touch on community at that point. Our life group, we did Zoom. Corey Taylor.
Yes, we did too.
Okay. So it was just the best because we would still meet. We would Zoom because everybody was fearful. We didn't really understand.
Right. Yeah. Well, and you're like, in the beginning, it was almost felt like it was disrespectful to people to keep on. You know what I mean? Like that's the way it was painted. That's the way it felt. And honestly, when we didn't know, I don't know how else we could have done it differently. You know what I mean?
Yeah. All right. Yeah. We did what we thought was best at the time.
Right.
And so we kept meeting. And also my girls from the retreat, I had grown up with some girls. And so we were doing Bible studies together. And so community all these years it's held me accountable.
Yeah.
Kept me in the word, kept me persevering because I wanted to give up so many times because you do. It's just part of it.
Yeah.
Like you talked about sanctification earlier. It's a process and the Lord's refining us. And sometimes we don't like that.
I mean, today, like, I woke up in a place of defeat this morning, but I honestly was like, when I feel defeated, like, I can't go on, like, that's not a bad place for me to be because you're you're going to have to fill me. You're going to
Absolutely.
have to do this work. I'm at the end of myself, and he has to bring me there.
That's right.
You know,
That's when he does his best work.
he does.
For
Hate it
sure.
so
I
much.
know. So hard to admit. But one day we're not going to have to worry about it.
Yes, one day we'll be like, that was why. You remember that day?
Yes.
Yeah.
He's
We
getting us
will.
to where
We
he
will.
needs us to be so that he can use us and work through us.
Yes.
But it's so hard getting to that point.
It is.
And so we had started a women's Bible study,
Mm-hmm.
our life group, actually.
Yeah.
And we were actually kind of scared to tell the men. We were like, y'all talk too much and we don't really get a word out. So we really kind of want our own study. That's how that started. And so it started out small, and I think it was like Monday nights, but it was hard to get childcare. And so finally we were like, okay, we're going to move to Wednesday nights.
Yeah.
And then we felt led to open it up to all women.
Right.
And so that has been, I will say, that has been one of the biggest blessings.
Yeah.
For sure. It's all women, all ages. It hadn't been easy.
Yeah.
It literally took us a year to go through Revelation. But we just dig in scripture by scripture. We let the Holy Spirit lead. And he has really blessed. He has spoken. He has given us wisdom and discernment that is beyond anything. And then when we don't understand, we always do what Greg Manley says, Deuteronomy 29:29. He lets us know the things we need to know, but then the rest he keeps hidden. So that's our go-to.
That's right. Well, it makes you dig in too when you have questions. You're like, okay, it's everybody's homework. Go home and look that up, you know?
And it's opened my eyes to like, quit being about religion, you know, like it's about relationship. It's about Jesus. Everything points to him. And some stuff that I might would have been like, oh no, that's not how I was raised. Like we didn't believe that. Well, now I'm like, was that scriptural?
Yeah.
Like, let me go back to God's word because that's the only truth there is.
Yeah.
And so I love it. We just go all throughout scripture.
Yeah.
And so it's been good. We've already done Revelation. Now we're going through Genesis.
Yes. Oh,
so it's like,
so good.
It's been so good.
There's a lot there in Genesis too.
And there have been so many faithful women who have been there all the time. Like we've had people come and go, but there's been some since day one.
Yeah.
And they just spur me on. They keep me going when I'm tired and I think I don't have the time. And sometimes I'll admit I don't want to sit down. I want to mindlessly scroll through TikTok.
Absolutely.
Like I want to do something I'm not supposed to be doing. Yeah. And it makes me dig into the word. And makes me seek after him. And I have grown so much closer to him through this because he's given me this. He's blessed me with this. I don't know what I'm doing at all, but he does. Yeah. And he has used it. And
there are times where like I'm sure you leave and go, did anybody get anything out of tonight?
Oh yeah. All the time.
Did you know, is this still for your glory? Is this still useful? You know? Yeah. Like when something goes on, because it's a long time for y'all to be doing that Bible study. Like people don't realize the ins and outs of that weekly that you do, you know, but but that feeling of defeat can rise up by just being like, it might not be a specific hardship. It might just be like, I don't know what the effects are. Yeah. But you might not see them. You know what I mean? But it doesn't mean that it's not. Yeah. You know?
And I just keep praying. I'm like, Lord, just whatever you have, I'm here. And as long as you have this, I will do it. But I got to have you. I can't do it. I can't do it without him. And it's been so cool to see that I'm not any kind of trained Bible teacher or anything. So that just shows that he can use anybody.
Absolutely.
You know?
Yeah. There's who among us is trained and equipped and ready for whatever it is. Yeah. He's called you to. You know, I mean,
and it's pretty cool to see that.
Seminary or no.
That's right. That's the thing. It's like, goodness gracious, but he's been so faithful. He really has.
So good. And here you are fighting complacency, praying for him to get you uncomfortable.
Yeah. I got way too comfortable for a little while.
Yeah. It's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Because it is. And I always go back and forth with, I still struggle with wanting things of this world. And I want things for my kids. Yeah. And I want them to have a good life. But I'm like, the Lord didn't call me to a life of comfort. And I think where I'm at today is I really struggle with trust lately because I do have a child who now he's an adult. Yeah. And do I trust the Lord that he has good plans for my kid? Right. I know he does, and I know he's going to take care of him, but having to really give up that control over Luke that I falsely think I have.
Right.
It's hard. It's been a really hard season for me.
It's so hard.
And Satan has ran with it. The enemy is real, and the enemy will try to put things in my head. And I just always have to come back to the truth. And thank goodness that the Lord doesn't allow me to stay in that. And like you felt defeated, the Lord didn't allow you to stay defeated today. Like the Lord got you up and got you here and has us talking about him.
Yeah.
Like, that's the best thing.
Yeah, it is. It is. And would this conversation have been the same without my surrender of like, okay, this is all I have.
Yeah.
This is all I have. No agenda. I have nothing left.
Yeah.
It's just, it's going to have to be you.
Yep.
You know?
Yep.
Yeah, that is, well, you hit on this with motherhood, like with everything in life, in earthly places, everything is about, if I put this in, then I'll get this out. If I study enough, I'll get a 4.0. If I do this, I can get that degree. I can, whatever it is that we feel like we can put enough striving in to squeeze out the result that we want. And faith doesn't work that way.
No.
And with motherhood and with faith, it's those first two servants and the parable of the talents. We, like the first one, I think it says what he specifically does to make the investments, but I think the second one we don't know. We don't know how he doubled his profits. We don't know how he did that because the emphasis was not on the input. I mean, the emphasis was not on the how or the specifics. The emphasis was on he was faithful. That was the input.
Yeah.
He was faithful.
Yeah.
And like with motherhood and with our things of faith, you can do everything right and they can choose something else. And what does that mean? You're not a good mom.
Yeah. I know.
You were faithful.
Yeah.
You know, and same thing with your Bible study and with this podcast and with, I can do all the right things and it could fail.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's not guaranteed.
That's right.
But all I can do is be faithful.
Yep.
That's all I can do.
Yeah.
You know, and the output is his.
Yes.
You know, I can't manufacture or manipulate those results, but I can pray.
That's right.
And I can surrender and I can walk faithfully. And that's all I can do.
Yeah. And I just always tell myself, I mean, what's the worst that can happen is failure. Okay, well, did it kill me? No. Yeah. But if God is in it, it won't fail. And so it's all about him anyways. And so if there's any ounce of me in it, it needs to be rid of anyways. And that's a hard place to be. That's hard. As I've gotten older and as I've walked this out, I've realized that's the place I want to be.
Yeah.
It's the best place to be. Not in the moment, but when you see the fruit of it and when you see changes in you that you know were not possible other than God who does the impossible, you want that for everybody.
Yeah.
And so that's where I'm at in my life is, you know, the Lord had Chad fully surrendered. He leads a Wednesday night Bible study too. Like, who would have thought?
That's awesome.
You know, the boy that I met in the driveway with the ankle bracelet. We all have a story. And it's so cool to see how the Lord uses all that and for his glory. And so it's just been cool to see all of our kids have accepted Jesus.
Yeah.
Praise the Lord. We're still, you know, trying to do this life. It is hard sometimes. It's hard with trying to faithfully serve the Lord, but also having to be
living in the world.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, in the world, you're right.
Yeah.
We're not of the world. And so it's hard. It is so hard, but it's so worth to just lay it all down and give it to him. And so I have struggled lately, like I said, with being comfortable. And so I've been praying. And then, of course, you call me to do this. And I also...
And urgently.
Yes. And I also got introduced to and asked to help with a prison ministry.
Yeah.
Like, that was such a blessing to me.
Yeah.
And so I went, I've only gone one time.
Yeah.
I go again, I think the end of this month. And there's real hurts out there, and there's people who are hungry for Jesus and need Jesus. And so it's like, that's what we're called to do.
Yeah.
Is to go out and speak him. And I love Jesus. I want everybody to love Jesus. And he can use somebody like me, then he can use anybody.
No.
And I want people to know that, and the joy that he's given me.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm not perfect by any means, but I want to just continue to do this, and I don't stay in a place of despair and defeat for long, because he's not going to let me. He pulls me out of that miry pit and stands me on a rock. And I'm just so thankful that he's changed our foundation from sinking sand to the rock of Jesus.
Yeah.
And all along, he had this plan for Chad and I, for our family. And I'm so thankful he kept us together for us to be able to witness what he can do in his faithfulness, because he has been very, very good to us.
That's amazing. Yeah. I always think that verse, I think it's in Hebrews 12, maybe, that he's the founder and perfecter of our faith.
Yep.
We're not.
That's right.
We're not the founder, neither are we the perfecter
of
our faith, but he is, and he's faithful to do it.
Yeah. And he will, because I've seen it.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much, Kelley.
Yes,
thank you. I really appreciate it. And I know that it's going to be powerful and helpful for not just one person, but even for that one that needed what you shared today. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It was an honor.
Thanks. And thank y'all so much for listening in this week. We will see you next week on the Saltworks.
This is my story. This is your story.